Our guests are seated, and we get to look at the issues for this morning. Abdul Malik Okubaku, editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, our regular panelist, is here in the studio. Dr. Oku Boy is MP Lejokuku and Deputy Health Minister. We'll be joined on Zoom, Samuel Nete George, MP Ningo Prampram, and he's a ranking member on the Communications Committee of Parliament. Of course, because we'll be talking about the GBC's fight with the Communications Ministry. Ernest Kofi Abochi is Dean, UPSA Law School. He's also joining us on Zoom. Thank you very much for making time to join us, Mr. Abochi. Okay, kindly work on your microphone. And then Godfred Yeboah-Dame, Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice, will also join us. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for making time.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So, yes, Godfred joins us on phone, and Godfred will be with us to discuss the very first issue of the Supreme Court judgment that we all now know, and the aspect of it that says that your birth certificate is no proof of your citizenship. What's all the brouhaha about? Have they said anything wrong? Okay, so let's begin by listening briefly to Godfred Dame. We'll listen to Kofi Abochi as well, and then we'll return to the studio to have the discussion.
It is just a record of births and deaths occurring in Ghana, and that's what it's supposed to be used for the process of ensuring, as far as I'm concerned, that's what it's supposed to be used for the process that I am part upon by statistical service. How many persons are born in Ghana, and how many persons now may be age over 18 and above. Yeah, when it's also stated here that your mother is a Ghanaian or your father is a Ghanaian, when there has not been any verification, and when that entry could have been actually provided by a person who is only an occupier or the premises in which we are born.
What would be the acceptable means of verifying those details? No, verifying that a person's mother and father were born in Ghana.
Yes, but I'm saying that is why when you're going to issue a passport, when a passport has been issued, now the process for issuance of a passport goes beyond the mere statement that a person is a Ghanaian. You're supposed to provide the names of your parents, grandparents, your hometown, address, and whatever.
How do you verify that those are your parents?
The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs yesterday was on your network, and I listened to him, and he said clearly that the officers there who sometimes, when they have genuine questions, will go to a process of verification. And I'm saying that this decision should be held and rather be resorted to by all state institutions and inform them as to how to then go about this process of issuing a passport and other important documents for a nation.
But you went through the process, Mr. Dame. How did they verify that you are a Ghanaian?
I had a Ghanaian passport.
How did you get the passport?
Issued only to Ghanaians. Look at the passport again.
Yeah, but how did you get the passport, Mr. Dame?
Okay, right. So
did you use your birth certificate?
Let me refer you to Section 3 of the Passport Act. Now, the Section 3 of the Passport and Travels and Visas Act, LSC Dictionary 155, clearly indicates that a passport other than diplomatic or special passport, as an ordinary passport, shall not be issued to a citizen except on payment of prescribed fee. So it tells you that it's only citizens of Ghana who are issued a passport. I mean, so really, the mere fact they have a birth certificate cannot establish under any circumstance that you are Ghanaian. And I think that the Supreme Court ruling was very sound and valid, and all those who are making those arguments are doing so without regard to the law.
You said that final paragraph indicates that the solution to this problem is the national identification card.
It says the need for some sort of
credible and reliable multi-purpose national identification system.
And I think that we'll get to a time that like other developed countries, once you are born, you are issued a card, and that card is sufficient. And all these processes about registration every now and then, and person having a different ID card for NIA, a different ID card for voting, a different ID card for passport purposes, will be done away with.
No, let me just say, first of all, that I think the decision is rooted in pragmatism, the decision itself. So this is a decision whose outcome may appear to be informed by pragmatic considerations. When the voters ID, when the original voters registration was adopted, indeed when the Constitution was adopted, I don't think the framers contemplated that a time will come where forensic and biometric registration may be invented, or so to speak, and may justify or necessitate and render outmoded a previous register that may have been adopted. I don't think that was, and I think therefore that may have been overtaken by time, which has created the situation we have today. Mm-hmm. But the reasons that are contained or were contained in the decision, the reasons that have been given by the court, some of them are a bit difficult to rationalize, with the greatest respect to the justices, and a great deal of respect.
Which of them do you have a difficulty with?
Well, I think you just mentioned the issue of the voters, the birth certificate. Mm-hmm. The birth certificate has been accepted for a number of reasons. I mean, for all kinds of things, identification purposes, for all kinds of things. You cannot get a passport of Ghana unless you have a birth certificate. Mm-hmm. So if you can be given a passport which is recognized as one of the modes, and the originating point of a passport usually is the birth certificate, but the passport as the end product can be accepted. However, the birth certificate, which indicates your lineage. In fact, if you look under the Constitution, the factors of citizenship, the birth certificate contains those factors. The issue of birth, the place of birth, the issue of the parentage. All these are contained in the birth certificate. So the decision is what it is, and at the moment, it is the law of the land. But the rational decisions and the rational reasons that have been advanced for them, again, with the greatest respect to the justices, some of them are difficult to justify, so to speak.
So you heard first Godfred Yeboah-Dame, who's the Deputy Attorney General, and you just heard Dean Abochi of the UPSA Law Faculty. Completely divergent views. Of course, what did you expect? Godfred Dame urged the position the Supreme Court has simply relayed to us on them. If you have read the documents he put in the court, he made the argument succinctly, and they agreed with him. If you have read the judgment also, they were simply agreeing with him. Now, let me begin with Mr. Abochi. What is your difficulty in appreciating the conclusion that the Supreme Court come to on the question of the birth certificate not being capable of presentation as identification for purposes of identification to prove your citizenship? This suit clearly was settled on the back of the Abu Ramadan case. And you find the court didn't do anything new, but simply tell us back what it had done earlier. What don't you understand about it?
Okay, because this is a public education thing, I need to first of all clarify that the decision of the Supreme Court is the law of the land. Our expression of opinion is merely commentary at this stage, so nobody should be mistaken that we are still engaged in an argument and the court's work is done. We are just expressing opinion after the fact. Now, here's the case. And again, I have a lot of respect for the justices of the courts, and the decision that has been taken, generally speaking, I think, broadly speaking, is all right with me. The non-inclusion of the birth certificate as a factor of identifying a citizen, that I have a difficulty with. And the reason I have a difficulty with that lies in the fact that even by Section 6 of the Citizenship Act, read together with the Constitution, it is clearly stated that a person is a citizen of Ghana if he was born in Ghana after the coming into force of the 1992 Constitution, or if either of his parents were Ghanaians at the time of his birth. Therefore, holding a document on which is written a birth certificate, which therefore means it certifies the contents therein, with biodata contained in the document, and the biodata clearly stating that X was born on a certain date, to certain parents, was given a certain name, was born in a certain hospital at a certain time, specific biodata that describes a certain person, I would think that that constitutes a form of identity, albeit a limited form of identity. Now, in respect of citizenship, it is such a vital document to the extent that it demonstrates the place of your birth, which is an important constitutional criterion for ascertaining whether or not you qualify as a citizen of Ghana under Section 6 of the Citizenship Act 2000 and under the constitutional provisions on citizenship. So I was looking for a little bit more detail in terms of the expatiation by the justices on the question of why, in spite of the Citizenship Act and in spite of the Constitution, it was still not a relevant document for consideration for purposes of ascertaining whether you qualify to be given a new voter's card or voter's ID card and for your name to be registered or entered into the register of voters.
Respond to this briefly to me. Respond to this briefly to me before we proceed. The court said a birth certificate is not a form of identification. Do you agree or you don't?
The court said it's not a form of identification, but again, it's an exposition on that. And so I'm not sure, let's be clear about this. Normally, identity documents tend to be accompanied by photographs. So you're not just reading biodata, but you're connecting it to a person who's identified by a photograph. So
you agree with that part. Then they proceed to say it does not establish the identity of the bearer, which you just said. You agree with that. Nor does it link the holder with the information on the certificate.
No, so you read. So that's the thing. You've read two different things. So it doesn't link the holder to the carrier. Sorry, it doesn't link the holder to the person claiming to be the one in the document to the extent that you can't connect it by a photographic element. In the absence of a photographic element, you have biodata, which merely describes certain content, and that can actually describe anybody else. And so, for example, you can have someone who actually responds to the data or document, all of which are contained in there. It may say you were born on a certain date, you were born to certain parents, you were born at a certain time. Somebody who was born in the hospital on the same day may actually respond to all those factors, including even the name.
Okay. So on the face of this statement, you don't exactly disagree that it does not establish the identity of the bearer, nor does it link the holder with the information of the certificate. The third thing they raise is, quite obviously, it provides no evidence of citizenship. There you disagree. Explain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There, with the greatest respect, I disagree. The issue of not providing evidence of citizenship. The Citizenship Act, together with the Constitution, from Article 6 of the Constitution, clearly states who a citizen of Ghana is. The Citizenship Act is even more specific about the fact that birth in Ghana, so you must have been born within the boundaries of Ghana. Once you are born within the boundaries of Ghana, you are a citizen on the face of it. If you were born, therefore, in Ghana and you have a citizenship, you have a birth certificate issued you by the Republic of Ghana, that is on the face of it, in the absence of any other derogating document. A document that, for example, any other derogating document or factor, such as fraud, among others, in the absence of any of these, on the face of it, by reason of the fact that you were born in Ghana, you qualify by birth. You qualify by having been born within the territory of Ghana, and therefore, if you are issued a birth certificate on the face of that, again, I'm looking for the reason why it is not, in spite of the fact that the Constitution, together with the Citizenship Act, are rather explicit about the fact that birth within the territory of Ghana qualifies you to be a citizen.
They say it does not satisfy the requirements of Article 42. Article 42 says to be a citizen, you must possess what and what? To be a voter, you must possess what and what?
You must be a citizen of Ghana. You must be 18 years of age and above, and you must have been of sound mind.
Are they correct? Are they correct in saying that the birth cert does not satisfy this requirement?
That is the logic of the decision. The decision essentially has said that by holding the birth certificate of itself, you do not qualify.
Okay, a bit of a problem with the connection to Abuchi there. Hello?
I mean, you do not qualify for the citizenship criteria. The justices don't say things. Hear me.
Okay. Now, you have read the judgment, and having read the judgment, you would see clearly that this conclusion or assertion they make, it derives from the Abu Ramadan case, where the court, differently constituted, required that the requirements of Article 42 ought to be met, and that is a very serious, consideration that has to be met.
I don't think anybody at all can take issues with Article 42. Article 42 is explicit, and the justices have time and again reiterated the effect of Article 42. Clearly, the justices' concern is how do you establish the citizenship criterion of Article 42? And it seems that from the decision, the justices have rather upheld the objections to including the birth certificate by saying that the birth certificate doesn't constitute an identity document for purposes of citizenship.
Okay, so in fact, if you could hold on briefly there for me, and Sam George, I just saw Sam George also on the Zoom. Thank you very much for joining us. We will get to the matters that require your greater contribution shortly. Now, Godfrey Dami is on the line. Godfrey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Samson.
Right. So,
and a good morning to the distinguished guests we have today, Dr. Kabore, Kofi Abuchi, and Akweku.
Great. So, when the Supreme Court says that, in fact, the birth certificate, for the purpose under discussion, is even worse than the NHIS card, which the Supreme Court had earlier rejected. It said it is worse than the NHI card, which was held to be unconstitutional as evidence of identification of a person who applies for registration as a voter. What's the use of my birth certificate?
Right. Okay. I think that I must pay tribute to your cross-examination skills. And indeed, in the question and answer session that you just engaging with Kofi Abuchi, it has become eminently clear that the initial reactions of certain people to the ruling were actually unfounded. And indeed, upon the process examination, you realize that fundamentally, most people who have to agree with the ruling was quite sound and all that. And the answer is actually in what you just said. The issue before the court was not really about citizenship. The issue before the court was about proof of eligibility to vote. The proof of eligibility to vote or register criteria that had been set out in CI 126 by the Electoral Commission were being proved. And the question was whether those two documents in issue, the old voter ID card and the birth certificate, qualified as proper instruments of identification of a voter and have to be allowed under CI 126. So, and of course, underlying it was then because the requirement of Article 42 about the ability to vote, the nationality of the person, the age, and the soundness of mind. Yes, underlying it will be a sub-issue of how to prove a person's Ghanaian nationality. And so that ought to make clear. So I think that in terms of proof of eligibility to vote, the NHIS card, which has been struck down as unconstitutional by the court, clearly, compared to the birth certificate, was even better. And therefore, the Supreme Court was right and come to the conclusion that the birth certificate was even worse than the NHIS card. Why do I say so? I say so because if you look at the birth certificate, apart from the mere identification of a person by name, there's no other identity at all established by the birth certificate. The birth certificate only establishes a person's identity by name. Even that identity by name is not verified, but at least it establishes it. Now, there's no identity by face, or by any biometric features in the birth certificate. So I can literally take your birth certificate, something like that, after having registered at Iowa West, and go to Kumasi or anywhere at all, and brandish it as my birth certificate. Even this, such a document were to be allowed as one of the instruments of identification of a potential voter, that would be the consequence. Anybody at all can just make a birth certificate because there's no biometric feature, there's no identity by face because there's no photograph there, and also you cannot connect the details on the birth certificate to any bearer at all. And that is what the Supreme Court said, and that is a fact that has been the case since 1965 when the Registration of Births and Deaths Act was passed to date. Yes, so I don't think there's any controversy at all. It was worse than the NHIS that the Supreme Court was right in so holding. Now you come then to the issue, what then becomes a birth certificate? As far as I'm concerned, it's just a record of birth. And that is what the law anticipated it to be. If you look at the Registration of Births and Deaths Act 1965 at 301, the object of the law is stated in a long title. The long title is what comes under the name of the act. It says it's an act to provide for the registration of births, fetal deaths, and deaths, and to provide for burial grounds and for related matters. And indeed, if you look at all the processes set out under the law, there's no requirement, there's no mechanism for proof of a person's nationality under the Act. Definitely not. It only records the birth and death. In fact, it records even fetal birth. That's a person, fetal death, that's a person who was born to replace what we call abortion. If the birth is aborted, yes, it is recorded there. Simple as that. And if you look at Section 2, which requires the registration of the birth and death to maintain register, it doesn't talk about any further obligation at all.
Okay.
Indeed, all the details on the birth certificate can be entered upon by a person who is not even relative. Section 8, subsection 3, is subject to subsection 2 of Section 36. The prescribed particulars for registration shall be furnished by A, the father and mother of the child, or B, in the case of the death or incapacity of the father and mother, I, the occupier of the premises in which the child is born, if the occupier has knowledge of the birth, or a person present at the birth.
Now,
so even the law is hold on. Even the law itself anticipates that a person who has no knowledge of your ancestry, a person who has no knowledge of your roots as a Ghanaian or as a non-Ghanaian, can even enter particulars of your birth. At the time that you yourself definitely you are a baby, and then how can you say the birth certificate should be used as proof of residency?
So why shouldn't I be allowed to present it, and then if there's a challenge, then we go through the process to establish whether in fact I am the holder and that the information contained on it is accurate? Because like it's being suggested, the same faults that we find with the birth cert can be found with the passports. The same way of verification problems you have with the birth cert can be associated with the passport as well. No,
I think there's an inaccuracy about that. And indeed, that ought to be demonstrated. Because Article 42 requires that you must be Ghanaian to start with. If the document or the instrument that you are holding does not prima facie establish that you are Ghanaian or even collect the details on the document to you, you cannot present it at all. So to start with, the birth certificate is out, and out. And that is why since 1992, the Electoral Commission itself has never used the birth certificate as an instrument for verifying a potential voter or an applicant for registration's identity.
How do you answer to the question then?
Now, if you look at a passport, there are further details required. Indeed, if applying for a passport, it's not just the mere brandishing of the birth certificate that is relied on.
So how do you answer to the ancillary question that the primary documentation of identification for the passport and for the NHIA cards are the birth cert?
Good. Because
again, the Foreign Affairs Ministry requires me to use the birth cert to prove my citizenship. in the Electoral Commission's manual, it says that if someone is challenged as to their nationality or citizenship, the birth certificate is sufficient. Then, in the National Identity Register, in Section 8, Section 8.3, 3A, it also provides for the birth cert as a document required by an individual for entry to be made in the register. That is the National Identity Register. How do you explain all this?
Right. Good. So I'm saying that the processes for obtaining a Ghana passport go beyond the mere production of a birth certificate. Indeed, if we look at the application procedure for a passport, it has an extra layer for verification of identity. And that is where there's the DAC guarantor system and the application for a passport form. You have a guarantor, you have a witness who signs, and the witness is supposed to be a senior public servant, a barrister, a solicitor, or even a priest. So in that process, there's that further requirement for verification of a person's identity. And the person who makes false disclosure through that process is liable for a crime. And it's punishable. So the false declaration process of obtaining a passport is punishable as a crime. So I think that and then passport office, clearly, under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we ought not to lose sight of the fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself has its own mechanism for verifying a person's identity. They have their research department, which is actually an investigative branch of the Foreign Service. And they also have access to the police, the CID, BNI, and whatever. So you have all these apparatus of state at the disposal of the passport office or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to indeed verify or confirm a person's claim to Ghanaian nationality.
Okay.
Then you have the national ID card too. Yes, apart from also the production of the birth certificate, there's also a requirement for a person to also be interviewed. There's an interview process, and if indeed there are doubts raised, the NIA goes beyond it. It takes a further step of verifying, and that verification process will involve even the production of witnesses and whatever. So I think that these mechanisms that have been set up by the state ought to really recognize what they are. They are means of ascertaining a person's identity.
But in the statement that the NHI card is it's even better for the purpose. How can you agree with that, except the photograph that is on that card? Because the birth cert has my parents, so it indicates my parentage. The birth cert tells you who my parents are, whether they are Ghanaians or they are not.
Right. Okay. So 2 points. First of all, when I say that the NHIS card compared to the birth certificate was even better, I'm not supporting a position that the NIA card is proper for the purpose of establishing a person's identity as a Ghanaian, or for the purpose of establishing the eligibility to vote. I'm only saying that comparatively, the two instruments put side by side, the birth certificate and the NHIS card, even the birth certificate was worse than the NHIS card, just as the Supreme Court said.
I see.
Yes, it's worse because really there's no proof of a person's identity apart from just a name, which is stated there, which could have changed even from birth and whatever. So, and there's no proof of the person's biometric features, name, like facial features, and whatever.
Okay.
So really, it was worse. Now, the second point I make is that yes, just because there has been a statement on the birth certificate that you are Ghanaian, cannot be taken for what it is. Because really, the truth is that there's no verification process. And that is a fact. There's no verification process required to establish a person's nationality. Even indeed, I state on my child's birth certificate that I'm a Ghanaian.
Okay.
Nobody requires me to prove that indeed I'm a Ghanaian.
Okay, just in some 30 seconds, how do you respond to people who are asking the question now, can my birth cert be used to prove my age?
Yes, I think that can be used to prove your age. It can be one of the means of establishing your age. If there's a doubt,
but you can't.
You have to go further.
But the same questions raised by the Supreme Court as to the birth cert connecting to me still remains. So how can it be used to prove my age?
Yes, I mean, it could be, but I'm saying it's not even conclusive proof. That is a reality. The reality is that it's not conclusive proof. Because at the time of obtaining the birth certificate, there is no verification whatsoever as to any details at all.
Right.
And the purpose, as I said, is just to record birth and death occurring in the country.
All right. Okay, so hold on briefly. Let me get just quick views from the non-lawyers on the discussion, and then I'll come to you and Abochi for just 2 minutes, responses, and then we end the chapter here. Kweku, what do you make of the discussion?
Well. When you have the legal brains talking, how do you expect people like us to also intervene? But why not? Free speech, part of the democratic dispensation. I'm getting the impression, and maybe I may be wrong, that right now, generally speaking, the verdict of the Supreme Court is acceptable and convincing, minus the birth certificate angle, which has become a subject of some controversy and public discussion. And it's good. We have scholarly critique, as we're having now, and that's fantastic. It helps improve the law going forward. It educates people like us too. Of course, we also have some propagandist attacks and distortions that even amount to scandalization of the Supreme Court. That's not something that we should encourage, but it's difficult to stop some of those ugly noises because of the vibrancy of our democracy. We might as well try and live with it. There's the possibility, and I know it is very limited, of those who believe they can appeal or seek review. The thing is unanimous.
It's a unanimous decision.
Yeah, so it's very difficult, but that's why I say very limited space.
Is it difficult or is
almost impossible, if you like. But, well, it's a right open for people to try and see if something can work. Because I hear people say, oh, if there's a change in administration, the Supreme Court itself will review that decision. That's unfair from a very purely legal point of view. It's in itself an obscure attack on the integrity of the justices who sat on the thing. And it's a political statement that is being made. Having said all these things, you see, as a non-legal mind and on the surface of things, yes, sometimes some of these judgments, verdicts, can make you ask questions. I recollect that when the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court, ruled on the Tommy Thompson, Kofi Kumsen case, there was this thing about criminal libel, seditious libel. We're all under the impression that private persons were not covered by that. You remember Mrs. Rawlings' case with Eben Kwaku, the cocaine matter. And it came that no, private persons could avail themselves. We were all surprised. And we made a lot of noise. Some political, some propaganda, some scholarly. Same with, if you recall, a Palu case, when there was this case about photo ID and the thumbprint, when the Supreme Court ruled a few days to the elections that both could be used. We were surprised and worried and made some noises here and there. There could be one or two more examples. Mesa Bonso, when the Supreme Court said truth was not, I think was Bamford Ado,
was not a defense.
Was not a defense. Some of us were surprised. We made noises. And then,
libel.
Yes, all sorts of things came up, scholarly critiques, and so it educates us. As we moved on, we realized where the substance of the verdicts lie.
Right.
When this matter came, instinctively, that was my first reaction. And so I wasn't worried about the differences, the divergence of opinion between top lawyers, legal brains, and all that. I said, well, that's part of it. We need to go through these processes to have a better understanding. Now, I am progressively shifting to the position articulated by Dami, based on all the issues coming up. And it is not because I'm any better legal mind, but I'm getting more convinced.
Okay.
I realized that, and he made that point, the birth certificate, and it came up because the second
The second plaintiff.
The plaintiff brought it up.
Right.
And it had to be dealt with. I've asked myself, why wasn't it ever part of the requirements for voter registration since 92? It never was. I don't think it was captured in CI 12, CI 72, or CI 91. And for that matter, the amended version, CI 126. So in terms of its history, there must have been a reason why it never really came up. And I suspect it's because of its insufficiency. If I recall, Mr. Abusi even made a point about it being limited in terms of scope. I suspect because of that, that's why it never came up for, inclusion.
Okay.
And to that extent, maybe we might as well move on with the Supreme Court verdict the way it's been captured. Yeah.
Right. And when you mentioned Banfordado, it was a question of contempt.
Exactly.
That came up.
Yeah.
Let's get to Sam George. In some 2 minutes, what do you have to say about the Supreme Court's judgment? Have you had the opportunity to read it?
It's interesting to hear all the justifications that are being made for the ruling or the ruling in the decision that was made, and the reasoning behind it that has been put out by the courts. It's just interesting that the same government that today is telling us that a birth certificate is not necessarily proof of identity. I wonder how then we can then say that the Ghana card, which, if you look at the National Identification Registry Act, the amendments that came to Parliament in 2017 under the same government, included the Ghana card. And if you want the birth certificate, if you want, I will read. That's the National Identity Register Amendment Act 2017, Act 950. Section 8 of Act 750 was amended as such, and this is 3. Section 8 of the principal enactment is amended A, by the substitution of subsection 1 of 1. The authority shall require an individual who applies for an entry to be made in the register to submit any of the following identity documents: A, a birth certificate; B, a valid passport; C, a valid residence permit. It goes on and on. So if even in 2017, the government came and said that for entry into the identity register, and the identity register is what shows your identity, identifies you as a Ghanaian. And that document was worked on by Mr. Godfrey Dami and the Attorney General's Department. It identified and recognized a birth certificate as a valid document that could be used to enter you into the National Identity Registry as passed by Act 950. I'm surprised that the flip-flopping of positions today, because maybe it may serve a political reasoning that says that a birth certificate is even worse than the National Health Insurance card. A birth certificate, when you are acquiring it, identifies who your parents are, identifies their nationality. And when you go to Article 6 of the Constitution, when we talk about who is a Ghanaian, identity of a Ghanaian, it spells out that you must be by birth, you must have been born in or outside of Ghana to either of a Ghanaian parent or grandparent. Now, your birth certificate identifies your parents and their nationalities before it confers on you a nationality. So for anybody to want to argue to me that that birth certificate, which identifies your parents and their nationality, which satisfies the condition for Article 6, identifying you as a Ghanaian or citizenship as a Ghanaian per the Constitution, and they said that that doesn't count for anything. Well, we're all at the mercy of the Lord Justices. They've given their judgment. We hear them, but we disagree with them respectfully.
Have you found time to read it? I'll urge you to read it. And sometimes, we have discussions that we all get into without first reading the decision. I'll give you just 1 minute, 1 minute comment. Yeah.
Samson, I've gone through the judgment.
You are holding a birth certificate here. What do you want to use it for?
But let me
you have only 1 minute.
Yeah, if you read Article 6, Chapter 3 of the Constitution, look at what it says too. Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, a person born in or outside Ghana after the coming into force of this Constitution shall become a citizen of Ghana at the date of his birth. If you truncate the reading at this point, you get the message wrong. Then the condition comes, if either of his parents or grandparents is or was a citizen of Ghana. People conveniently let go of this in making the argument. If you read in totality, you get the message. Now, I brought my birth certificate.
Oh, this is your own birth certificate?
This is my own birth certificate.
Okay.
I can't find mine.
Certified by the Commission of Oaths. And look at what is on. Bernard Okoboy, name, sex, male. Name of father, Emmanuel Boy Labi, occupation typist, nationality Ghana. Listen, I didn't produce anything for them to capture this information. The same with anybody holding this. He didn't need to be there in person to prove that he's a Ghanaian. But I
the same way if you went to the passport office or you went to the NIA card
but my brother told you that you need a guarantor from it. Those are buffers to make sure that now mother Mary Ajeti, nationality Ghana, it's by word of mouth. That's what I told them. Now where Salem Hospital
that's what your parents told them.
No, that's in fact, this was the new.
The one that
I had to go there.
Right.
In fact, 2008.
Because now, you can't use the old one for a passport.
So this gives you information. If you want to work with it, you might need other mechanisms to establish it. This is from Germany. This is for my daughter, the second one. It gives you information. Place of birth in Bremen. The registration number is here. Now, if you are born in Germany and none of your parents is a German, you cannot be a citizen. You cannot go for a passport. But wherever you come from, they will give you this to show that you were born in Germany at a particular place at a particular time. If the mother wants to claim citizenship for the child, I am not a German. She is. She has to be there in person. Produce her document to show that that is her daughter. In fact, in some occasions, they even do DNA test. So any lady or girl in Ghana can produce this at any point to say that this is my birth certificate from Germany. Now, so you realize that it's not even a national phenomenon, it's a universal phenomenon. And secondly, I'm not a lawyer, but let me say that if in our constitution we had settled in it that being born in Ghana is proof of citizenship, nobody would have issues with it. But once that is not the case, and there must be proof of Ghanaian blood, that's parents or grandparents, I think we have to get it right. And so, and you see, there's a reason why they said it's even worse than an NHI card. With the NHI card, its flaw had to do with the fact that residents could also get it. But what is better about the NHI, even compared to this, is that you can enter a system and pull out the person. You can track the person to the card. But this, you cannot.
So why don't you use this and require the further verification processes that is required when you go for passport?
So,
for the purposes of registration as a voter.
You've been saved the headache of producing this, going to get a guarantor who is a solicitor or barrister by being told that get two people who have the card. And then you are done.
That's very interesting an argument. Okay, so now let me go to the two lawyers. 2 minutes each for both of you. Godfrey Dami, why shouldn't the birth cert be what you lawyers say, prima facie an identity document for the purposes of confirming my citizenship? Prima facie.
Yes, because inherently there's even no requirement for establishment of a person's identity under the processes that have been set out under Act 301. So if there is no inherent or inbuilt mechanism for ensuring that every detail that is entered onto the birth certificate is valid and can be connected to the bearer of the birth certificate, why should we use? That's what I'm saying, that we ought to just take account of the sole purpose of the birth certificate, that it is recorded birth in Ghana. And it's very significant that the laws of citizenship in Ghana, yes, even though the first one is citizenship by birth, has a further requirement for the nationality of the parent, nationality of the parent of the person to also be Ghanaian. So there's no automatic right to Ghanaian citizenship by virtue of having been born on the soil of Ghana. That is in contradiction to the situation that prevails in the United States of America and Canada. And even in the UK too, they have stopped recognizing automatic citizenship by birth. And that's very important. That is why I say that citizenship in Ghana is a very serious issue, very important matter. So just merely being born in Ghana and having a record of that birth, evidenced by a birth certificate, should not entitle you to a claim of citizenship. Because there's a federal requirement by the law for your parents to be Ghanaian. That is why.
Right.
And I think that is for this reason that I now understand why the NDC never sued on the basis of the birth certificate. NDC never made a case at all in court that the birth certificate should be used. And that's because they knew that is not really the proof of nationality and has never been used since 1992. So as a major player in the political affairs of Ghana, they themselves knew it. And now, I think these nonsense, with all respect, are quite hypocritical. And indeed, they follow. If you listen to President Obama, his reaction to the ruling, he himself made statements that, there's a grand conspiracy by certain persons to deprive them of their right to vote. So this is a sequel. This is a consequence to that. This is a corollary to all the statements that they made, trying to insinuate that certain persons are involved in a grand conspiracy to deprive Ghanaians of their Ghanaianness or Ghanaian nationality. I think that ought not to be condoned.
Okay.
Now, just briefly about the Ghana card. You know, if you read Abu Ramadan number 1, I'm sure definitely something your authority on it. Abu Ramadan number 1, the concluding paragraph by Chief Justice Wood actually recognized the Ghana card or anticipated the development of a system like the Ghana card. So clearly, he says that the need for a credible and more reliable multi-purpose national identification system, because the Supreme Court had recognized way back in Abu Ramadan number 1 that there's the absence of that credible national identification system in Ghana, and tried out for the development of such a system. And that system is what has now been developed by the National Identification Authority through the issuance of the Ghana card. And indeed, very soon we'll get to a system where we'll get to a stage where the Ghana card will just be the primary document.
Okay.
Establish a person's Ghanaian identity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mechanisms for doing so. Apart from just the issuance of the Ghana card, there's also a data exchange platform that allows for data verification of all other ID cards issued in Ghana, whether by NHIS, EC, and whatever. Then there's also a register of Ghanaians by birth, developed by the NIA. And that register of Ghanaians by birth also indicates who has died, at what time, and whatever. There's also another register of Ghanaians who acquire Ghanaian nationality by registration and by naturalization, as allowed by the Citizenship Act of Ghana.
Okay, all right. So, thank you very much, Godfred Yeboah-Dame, for the explanations given. And I think that you would also be interested in finding out that the guarantor system, which appears to have been the absence of the previous voter registration card and the birth certificate, what they could have done, the argument was that they will cut a lot of people out. And then your argument before the court was that that was untenable because in all the registration processes we have done over the period, the guarantors account for 90% of the people who got onto the voters register. Through the new system, we have just realized after the first phase that guarantors constitute only 34.4%. It is rather the Ghana card that has chalked almost 64% of people who are getting onto the voters register. Thank you, Dami. And now let's have Abuchi make his final comment. And Godfred Yeboah-Dame made reference to the CJ's statement, and I think I have to make it in full. The CJ in the Abu Ramadan case said that the need for a credible and reliable multi-purpose national identification system comprising the relevant data and communication infrastructure that would answer to most of our national needs, whether for electoral planning or development or other purposes, is greater than ever before. We think the time has come for the appropriate authorities to respond to this need. My expectation of this was that we could use our Ghana card as our voters' ID card, and then use it for our health system, use it for our driving and all that. Ms. Abuchi, what would be your concluding comments? 2 minutes.
Okay, so first of all, I have a great deal of respect for Godfred Dame, the Honorable Godfred Dame, and therefore I do not contradict him lightly. But I think it's important for us to just also recognize what we're doing. First of all, this is just an evidence. So it is not supposed to be conclusive. I think to that extent we agree. We agree that it is not conclusive. It is only evidence of citizenship, i.e. you present it, And if there are further auditing and questions that ought to be done to verify whether the statements that are made thereon are actually true, those can be done. So I think we agree to a limited degree. But where we disagree is the fact that it should be excluded entirely. It could be looked at. I think there's nothing wrong in the surplusage of information. If you are verifying something, there's nothing wrong with having an abundance of information. And if birth is one of the factors, both the Constitution and the Citizenship Act repeats the birth factor. So birth is one of the factors. And indeed, as was read by one of the panelists in there, the Deputy Minister of Health, if you were born, for example, before 1993, your birth in Ghana is an automatic indicia of your citizenship. If you were born after 1993, your lineage is the main indicia. So you can look at these, and looking at these as a surplusage of information simply enriches the process of verifying who Ghanaian citizens are for purposes of the registration. So it is not a conclusive statement of citizenship, but it's an indicia, and one that I respectfully think ought to have been looked at. And again, the justices took a limited view of the birth certificates by reason, among others, I suspect their major worry is the fact, and again, the Deputy Minister mentioned that, you see, people can obtain birth certificates today without sometimes even being there, and that's the problem. And even if they are there, their statements may not necessarily be verified and checked and audited. So it is possible people may have obtained birth certificates without actually being Ghanaians. And that could be part of the worries I'm sure the justices encountered, which is part of the reason why they raised the bar and decided not to accept the birth certificate. Okay. Now, in fairness to the decision, though, the previous legislations, and I think the judgment mentioned that, the CI 72 and CI 91, both of them excluded the birth certificate. So there has been a consistent practice, and the judgment was very explicit on that. There has been a consistent practice of excluding the birth certificate from the purview of ascertaining citizenship. But for me, the fact that there has been a consistent practice and a uniform practice in this respect still doesn't change the fact that it is a worrying trend. The major means of ascertaining citizenship in Ghana is birth. And if the major means of ascertaining citizenship is birth, both by reason of the Citizenship Act and the Constitution, and we still decide not to use the major factor of birth, which is the certificate, then I think I respectfully see a big hole in that respect, and that's why I worry about that. But I'll finally say that we should also not politicize the decision. And I've heard statements about, the judgment changing and all that, government changing and all that. The decision is a judicial decision. It has been judicially rationalized. And it was a unanimous decision. And that is why we can't even politicize it at all, because it's a unanimous decision, which is one of the very few decisions in Ghana's jurisprudence where we have the entire court agree. And so
well, I think some of those comments are comments that you can ignore without further ado. Thank you all very much. We take a quick break. When we return, there's been some violence in the registration exercise. And as you know, the political tension appears to be rising. How do we bring it down? We'll be right back.